Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new mini-series called Coder's Corner. I'm your host, Himesh, and joining me for this mini-series is one of our programmers, soon-to-be statistician at Veramed, Hector. Hector, hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Himesh. Thanks for having me.
So, Coder's Corner is something that we've had set up within Veramed for a number of years now. Will you be able to tell the audience a bit about how it started and sort of what it is?
Yeah, so I started Coders Corner as a way for people to get involved with knowledge sharing. I think we started off with the idea that as people sort of build up their knowledge in SAS just kind of through chance, their projects that they're working on, sometimes they pick up code that other people have written and learn from it. We wanted a kind of knowledge bank or some central location that we could store all this information, and then people can just go to it and learn it for themselves. So you've got all these little nuggets of information, and instead of people kind of having their own collection, we've got a central collection.
Yeah, excellent. Well, the whole point of this mini-series is that we get to share some of these tips that you've collected over the years with the audience, really. So, Hector, what tips do you have for us today?
Okay, so the first tip, this is one that I wrote reasonably recently. It's about comment types, which is probably something that you don't really think about too much, but it turned out to be a really, really difficult tip to write, because it's kind of a lot more complicated than it would first seem. So I think most people who use SAS will be familiar with what the comment types are. So you would have sort of a standard inline comment with an asterisk, and then you end it with a semicolon. You also have a macro comment, which is the percent asterisk, and then end that with a semicolon. And then you have the block comment, which is with the slash star, and then end with a star slash. And I think most people's understanding of these comment types generally falls around they'll use asterisk style or block style and not really think about why they're using that particular comment type. A lot of people will use asterisk style because it seems like the default, and then when that breaks for whatever reason, they'll switch to block style. And in general, it's true that the block style comment is the most sort of robust. It's the hardest to, I think it's virtually impossible to sort of make a mistake with it unless you happen to comment something out that you didn't actually want to. But I'll briefly go through what the sort of inner working, well, not inner workings, but a kind of brief overview of how the comments actually work and why they break. So with the asterisk style comment, what SAS is actually doing is it sees the star as the start of the comment, and then it processes each word, or it kind of thinks of it as a token individually, and it goes through tokens one by one until it finds a semicolon. The issue with this is that this happens after the macro processor has gone through it and done its thing. So if you put a asterisk style comment inside, for example, a percent if, percent else, it will start to read this comment in the context of a macro. And when it sees the semicolon that ends the comment, it actually reads that as semicolon in the macro code, and that will end the percent if statement. So then you end up in the situation where you have a percent else, and it's actually not connected, if you will, to the percent if, and then that will break your code. And that's kind of really, really common, I found with, and I did it as well when I was starting out, like with graduates that come out of the training program, because you start to try and use some macro logic, and you're used to putting comments to just to help explain what's going on in the code. You put a little comment just before the percent else and your code breaks. And then you think, well, I'm just going to use a block style comment because that will definitely work. I think the correct solution really is to use a macro comment, because that, as the name suggests, is actually processed as part of the macro. So it works kind of the same way as the asterisk star comment. It just sees the %* as the start of the comment, and then obviously this is at the macro level, so it's not gonna see that semicolon that ends the comment as part of macro code. It's gonna see it as part of the comment. The issue with macro style comments and the sort of technique to breaking them is they actually look for certain characters that need to be paired with other characters. And the classic example is the apostrophe. If you put an apostrophe in a macro comment, it will actually start building this token as a quote, and it will be looking for this matching apostrophe to close the quote. And if it doesn't find it, it will basically just read the rest of your whole program as if it were one massive comment. And I think you'll get a warning or an error log if this happens in your code. But generally, this is why most good programming practice advises you to not use apostrophes in comments. And this is kind of why, even though it's only actually macro style comments that this is an issue with, that's why the good programming advice exists. And then I think like a lot of people will use the block style comment as the last one, and they'll just use that as their default because it doesn't do anything like the other comments where it looks for tokens. It actually just processes each character one by one, and it just waits until after you start it with this /* it just waits until it sees / again. I think the only reason why I would encourage people to try and use a mix of asterisk style and macro style comments instead of just using block style everywhere is that if people want to quickly comment out big sections of code, it's really difficult if there's block style comments just scattered throughout. It's kind of the idea is that it's for commenting out big sections of code, and like that those sections may include other comments within it. So like if somebody picks up your code on a study after one that you've done, then they'll probably want to like comment out half of it just to like make sure that they're running the first few bits correctly. I know that's what I do when I pick up a program. I'll sort of block comment out most of it and just make sure that at least the first few data sets are reading in correctly on the new study. And yeah, if someone's like just scattered block style comments throughout their code, it's really, really difficult to do that. I think that's pretty much all I've got to say on it. And I think, yeah, I've been talking for 5 minutes or so now. So got any questions?
Excellent. Thank you very much. So when you're writing, let's say you've got a standard, let's say table program, and you've got, let's say you're just doing summary statistics. So you've got a macro within your code. So you would use, which type of comments would you use for, let's say your header, and then your just comments on your section? Would you put comments before the macro to explain what the macro is doing, and then comments in the macro as well, like depending how complicated it is, and which style would you use when and where?
Yeah, so yeah, I would definitely. So the first thing that I would do is put an asterisk style comment before the macro to explain what's going on. And if possible, just kind of try and if it's not too big a macro, just write quite a long asterisk style comment ahead of the macro just to explain the whole thing. I think that's what I tend to do in my code anyway. So I tend to go for a long comment at the start of a section so that someone picking it up is sort of prepared for the code that they're about to read. And then within like the following code, the comments aren't that long. They're just sort of labels that refer back to the original comment. Within a macro, I'd say use macro style comments. Kind of makes the most sense and won't break. And yeah, just bear in mind that there's there's the risk of breaking it if you use an apostrophe. I think there's a few other characters, like maybe brackets. It will try to pair up or something. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I'm sure that's commenting is something that we all told to do and we all should do, obviously, for good program practice. But I don't think, like you mentioned earlier, like sometimes once you get in the habit of using one style of comment, that is what you'll use throughout.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not something that people probably give much thought into. So Hector, thank you so much for joining me this week. I'm sure people will get a lot from that tip. Thank you all very much for listening. If you would like to learn more about the tip that Hector has just given about the comments, we'll be putting something on our Instagram page where we will sort of show the different types of comments and which ones to use when and where. Thank you all very much for listening. Hector, thanks again for joining me. And until next time, goodbye.
Thanks for having me.